Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video I'm going to be sharing my top tips for GCSEs. I sat my GCSEs in the summer of 2023 and before my GCSEs I watched a bunch of videos just like this one. Throughout my GCSEs I received a lot of advice, whether it was from parents, friends, teachers, so that's what I'm going to be sharing in this video. Along with my advice, I'm also going to be including the advice of some other sixth form students who also completed their GCSEs last year. Hopefully that will give you an insight into other people's opinions. Also, the majority of the advice that I talk about in this video is just general exam advice. So if you aren't sitting your GCSEs or you aren't from the UK, so you don't take GCSEs specifically, these tips are still applicable to other exams. If this is the first video of mine that you're seeing, then hello, welcome. My name's Ellen, and today I'm going to be sharing my best advice for GCSEs. Okay, so this video is going to be split up into 6 different sections. The first is prepping for GCSEs. Then we've got time management, motivation, self-care, working smarter not harder, others' advice, and then my closing points. I put the timestamps on the screen, but I'll also put them in the description so you can navigate to certain points if you want to. Starting with prepping for GCSEs, I feel like the most asked question when it comes to GCSEs and exams in general is, when should I start revising? There isn't a set answer to this question, but personally for me, I would say you don't want to start revising too early on because then you're more likely to burn out, but you also don't want to leave it too late. Most people sit their GCSEs from May to July, and I started revising around March, and that was definitely far too late. When you first start year 11, you have teachers constantly nagging you to start revising, and sometimes it can feel like they're being a bit dramatic because you think,
well, they're 6 months away, why should I be bothered about them now?
But you don't really realise that they are actually right until it's too late. Like I said, I started revising just before March, and I think it would have been much better if I started around January time because it meant I had the Christmas break to sort of slowly work towards a full revision timetable, and then as of January I would have preferably started revising then. But if you are a year 11 that happens to find this video after January, please don't stress. You do still have time. I just think make the most of whatever time you do have left. Don't leave it any longer, just get started on it as soon as possible. However, before you even get to year 11 or revision, there are quite a few things you can be doing right from the get-go to set you up for success. These are things that you can be doing in year 10, year 9 even, things that really you can be doing at any point throughout secondary school. The first thing, which I think is the most important, is experimenting with different revision techniques. When I got to year 11 at my school, the most common problem was people just didn't know how to revise. My teachers were constantly being asked, well miss, what revision resources should I use? How should I revise? Do flashcards work? Is this better than this? And the issue with that is when you get to GCSEs, you want to already know 100% what works for you, so you're not wasting time trying to work that out when you should be learning the content. Personally, what I did, which I think worked really well for me, was when I had end of topic tests or mocks throughout year 10 and year 11, I used different revision techniques and then compared my marks. Personally, I'm a visual learner, so things like mind maps and colourful notes is what helps me. I think it's just a matter of trying out different things and seeing what works for you. If you would find it useful, I can actually do a separate video on different revision techniques because I genuinely think I have tried every single revision technique that there is over the course of the past 2-3 years. I'll probably put a poll in my community tab, so if that is something that you're interested in seeing, then make sure to go onto my community tab and you can vote on there. Okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about is homework. I think homework is such an important thing to get into the habit of doing early on. When you get to year 11, the work does definitely pile up from year 10 and year 9. If you don't stay on top of it, it just becomes too much. If you just get into a routine where you do your homework the night that you get it, then you just avoid so much unnecessary panic. And getting into those routines early on is going to be so much more useful for you when you get to year 11. Alongside homework, I can't stress this enough, please make resources as you go along. You learn the bulk of the content for GCSEs in year 10, and most people just think that, oh well, year 10 is the last year of fun before GCSEs, I don't need to do any revision. But there's so much content to cover, especially when most people are taking 10 subjects. I think you should start making resources at the end of every single topic because that way it's not going to build up and then you get to year 11 and it's like this massive stack of flashcards that you've got to get through, or you've got to make notes on like 50 different topics that you learnt in year 10. It's just much easier and more manageable if you do it as you go along rather than all at once when you get to year 11. The last thing I want to talk about in this section is teachers. It is so important that you make use of having your teachers there. Your teachers literally get paid to help you. That is their job. I think people don't realise how helpful it is to go and ask teachers if you're stuck on something. If you aren't 100% sure on a topic, go ask your teacher. Personally, for me at my school, all of my teachers were so nice, and if I ever was stuck on something, all I had to do was tell them and they'd give me extra resources or explain it to me. Sometimes it's just useful to have somebody else explain something to you, because when you're doing independent revision, sometimes it just doesn't click until you have somebody else explain it. Moving on to part 2, time management. I have gotten better at it, but throughout GCSEs I did really struggle with time management. So I'm going to share a couple of the things that I found helped me. Starting off with routines, find what works with you and stick with it. Having routines means that you are actually going to stay on top of your work, and it also makes sure that you don't waste any time. I think I was probably a bit too structured with my time because I did literally plan out minute by minute what I was going to do after school each day. But it can be as simple as just time blocking what you're going to do. My school gave us blank timetables where we could block out travel, homework, school, extracurriculars, and I think I did take that to a bit of an extreme level. But even just as simple as blocking out when you're going to do each thing means that you are holding yourself accountable. Now, something that's very similar to what I've just talked about is a revision timetable and sticking to that. Revision timetables can look really different for different people. They can be subject specific, topic specific, or if you want to be really extra, even activity specific. What I mean by that is, personally for me, rather than just saying on a Tuesday I'm going to do chemistry for an hour, or saying on Tuesday I'm going to do chemistry exothermic reactions for an hour, I would actually say to myself, right, I'm going to do chemistry exothermic reactions, flashcards for half an hour, then I'm going to do past papers for half an hour. I was very, very specific with it. I think that was definitely a good thing because I had an entire list of topics and I made sure that I went through every single one. But I know for some people having a bit more flexibility with timetables is much better for them. I made mine on Excel, which I think was definitely a good idea rather than physical paper ones, because I could easily change things and move things around if my plans changed. On the back of that though, I will say, make sure if you are going to make a revision timetable, make it realistic, please. I found that I would just set myself an unrealistic amount of work to do each day. You want to make something that's realistic for you so that way you will stick to it. All I will say, and yet again I'm a bit of a hypocrite for saying this because I absolutely love planning, but making a routine schedule or a timetable for a revision, that's all planning. And it's all good and well if you make a plan, but if you don't stick to it and you don't actually revise, there's no point of making a plan. Like, yes, that's helpful, but it's not the most important thing. And if you're going to spend more time planning your revision than you actually do revising, then it's a waste of time. I used to trick myself. I'd tell myself that, oh, well, I'm making a to-do list, or I'm making a revision timetable, so I'm being productive. But that was actually my version of procrastination because I was just like, well, no, I'm doing things for school. It's my version of revision. I'm planning. I'm being organised. No, I was just avoiding doing the actual work. When it comes to doing the actual revision, I personally enjoyed using the Pomodoro method. I sort of fluctuated between doing 25 minutes of work and 5 minutes break to 45 minutes of work and 15 minutes of break, depending on what topics I was doing. If it was something I really struggled with, I'd only do 25 minutes at a time because I needed a break every 25 minutes. But I found that sometimes having a 5-minute break wasn't long enough, so doing 45 minutes of work and then a 15-minute break was a bit more realistic for me. Yet again, I think it's just important that you find what works for you. Revision is genuinely a really personal thing. It differs for different people, which is why you probably won't relate with every single thing that I talk about in this video. So hopefully if you find at least one thing that you can take away from it, then that's the main thing. But breaking revision up into chunks is definitely important for keeping your brain engaged. You don't want to overload. If you're working for 2 hours straight, there's absolutely no way you're going to be able to concentrate. And if you don't give yourself breaks in between study sessions, then you are going to burn out really easily. Okay, moving on to the next section of this video, motivation. This is probably the hardest thing for every single student. Motivation can be really hard to find, especially in a stressful period like GCSEs. there were 3 things that I did throughout GCSEs to keep me motivated. The first thing was think of a why. You've probably heard plenty of people talk about this before, but if you think about why you're doing something, you're more likely to stick to it because it's like that future vision that you can remind yourself of every time you sort of lack that motivation. Hey guys, I'm currently editing this video. Ironically, I'm wearing the exact same jumper I was wearing on the day that I filmed this, which is fitting. But I feel like I didn't really elaborate on this point very much. So I just wanted to quickly explain what I was trying to say in the video. When I was talking about finding a why, what I meant is you can think of possibly maybe a career that you have in mind, or a university you want to go to, or a college, and use that as motivation. You're pretty much just coming up with a reason that you can continuously remind yourself of why you want to get the specific grades. The second one, which is definitely something I did a lot, was just picture myself on results day not getting the results that I wanted, and then I use that to make me do revisions so that I wouldn't be in that position. And the third is romanticising studying. I am a bit of a sucker for aesthetic stationery. If you've seen my back to school haul, you'll see that I buy a lot of stationery because it just helps me want to revise. Whether it's highlighters, candles, ornaments for your desk, just make it a good work environment. Now the next section of the video is what I think I needed to hear the most before GCSEs. This is something that I just kind of neglected throughout GCSEs, to be honest, and it's self-care, being kind to yourself. In the moment, GCSEs can feel like such a big thing and you sort of lose track of what's actually important. If you're constantly working all the time, all that's going to happen is you run out of energy and you burn out. When it comes to exams, I think giving yourself breaks is just as important as the actual revision. And it can be just as simple as giving yourself one self-care day a week. I had intended to do that throughout GCSEs but didn't really stick to it. It's still important to have quality time with friends and family, you know, socialise, spend time with people who have similar academic goals to you. I think it's really important that you surround yourself with supportive people, try and avoid drama. It's just unnecessary stress on top of exams and revision that you don't really need, so try and avoid that where you can. And even just continuing with hobbies can be another stress reliever. I do ballroom, Latin American and freestyle dance, and I stopped to dance for 4 months throughout GCSEs, and I also go to an art club on a Wednesday, and I started going to that fortnightly rather than weekly. Although that gave me extra revision time, I think I would have done better in my GCSEs if I continued with my hobbies, because they gave me a break from revision. Now for my favourite part of this video, working smarter, not harder. The first thing that I would recommend is make the most of online resources. There are so many good GCSE resources out there. I've got a list of some of my favourites here. So, free science lessons, brilliant for required practicals, Quizlet, Enki. I used EnquiDroid because I have a Samsung, but both of them are really good for flashcards. Seneca, Physics and Maths Tutor, GCSE Pod, Corbett Maths, the list goes on, there's plenty of them. It just breaks up your revision, it means you're not constantly just writing or reading, because that can get quite boring. Okay, the second thing, which is so overlooked, and I feel like not many people use it, but it's so important, is the specifications. This is something that probably is a bit more specific to GCSEs rather than exams overall, but for your exam boards, if you just search in like the subject, then the exam board and then specification, it should bring up a document which details everything you need to know for the exam. Literally every single bit of content that you could possibly be tested on is on that document. So if you know every single thing on the list, well then you're sorted. If you're prepared to sacrifice probably an entire ink cartridge, you could print out a specification for each subject, so then you can tick them off. I personally just had them digitally and then I referred back to them when I needed them. But that way you're not going to miss anything out and you're not going to revise anything unnecessary. I know I mentioned earlier in this video about doing a separate video on revision techniques, but I will just say briefly that when it comes to revision I would recommend active recall. If you've watched plenty of study videos before this one, then you've probably heard of the difference between active and passive study methods. Passive revision techniques are things like just reading the textbook or highlighting notes. They don't really engage your brain very much, and although I would say that I like doing things like making notes, for instance, to consolidate knowledge, they aren't very good for making sure that you remember or understand things. Whereas active revision methods like flashcards or blurting, which is where you write down everything that you can remember about a topic without your notes, and then you fill in the things that you missed afterwards. That way you can see where you have gaps in your knowledge and you can revise those things. There was an image that was practically drilled into our brains throughout GCSEs, and it was the forgetting curve. It's just essentially the idea that as time goes on, the amount of things that you can remember decreases. But if you revise those things at regular intervals, then you get your memory back up to 100% each time. The way that I did this was using what's called the Leitner system with my flashcards. It's pretty much where you just have a box of flashcards for each category as such. So you have one which is the flashcards that you go over every day, one which is every second day, one which is 3 times a week, one which is once a week, and the last one is once a fortnight. And you start with the everyday box, which obviously you go through every day, and if you get a flashcard right, you move it up to the next box. And then the same thing you do with all the other boxes corresponding to the time that's on each one. But the thing is, if you get a flashcard wrong, you have to move it back to the very first box, which is every day. Doing that just means that you make sure that you're going over every single bit of information and making sure that you understand it and remember it all. Also, by moving the flashcards back to the first box if you get it wrong, it means that you're constantly checking that you know everything inside out. It also allows you to identify weaknesses and spots that you don't know as well. I would also recommend, in terms of finding your weaker topics and subjects, is to rank your subjects in order from most confident to least confident, and then for each subject make a list of all the topics and do like a RAG spreadsheet, so red, amber, green. I did one on Excel and I was constantly updating that. But you just colour code them, either red, amber or green, depending on how confident you are with them. And then you prioritise the ones that are red because obviously you aren't as comfortable with them. And the very last thing that I want to talk about for this section is exam questions. Doing exam questions is honestly so important. I wish I did more of them. I didn't do that many. 1, it allows you to familiarise yourself with the content, but 2, you get used to the exam techniques, so it means that in the exam you're more likely to understand what the examiners are looking for. Okay, so that's pretty much all of my advice. I am now going to insert some clips of other students' advice.
Who am I here with? Zoe. If you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice for GCSEs, what would you say?
Actually do something for once. I didn't do anything, let's be real. But I still got good grades, which is actually really weird. I don't know how I did that. But yeah, actually do something so I got better grades, you know? Like, I would have actually got 7s in all my sciences instead of 2 7s and 1 6. No. And I got a 6 in biology somehow, so...
Who am I here with?
Olivia.
What's a piece of advice for kids that are doing their GCSEs?
Do past papers, like know how to do the answers. Yeah. There you go.
Thank you. Yeah, exam questions. Who am I here with?
Izzy.
What's one piece of advice for GCSEs?
Make sure to keep a balance of work and socialising.
Good advice. Who am I here with?
Lucy. And Georgia.
What's your advice for GCSEs?
To space your revision out equally and don't just cram it the night before. Make like a revision timetable and structure in breaks so you know when you're doing what.
Good advice. Thank you.
Okay, so that's officially the end of today's video. Overall, I would just say not to stress about it too much. As long as you try your best, that's all that matters. If you did like this video, please make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on post notifications so you're notified every single time I post a new video. Thank you so much for watching this video. Good luck with your GCSEs. I know you're going to smash it, and I will hopefully see you next time. Bye!